Hi, in this video, we're going to talk about winter weather installation of roof trusses, floor trusses, and wall panels. My name's Chad Johnson. I've been in the component industry for over 30 years. I'm excited to talk to you about this topic. So as we transition from the warmer months into the cooler and wetter, it's important to prepare for the deliveries of components and the installation a little bit differently than we would when it's nice and sunny out. So one of the first things that we need to do is we need to make sure that we prepare our job site. When we have rain, snow, other conditions like that, it has a tendency to make the ground less supportive for delivery vehicles. And so it's important to have a driveway that is well prepared, including a solid foundation and enough gravel on top to provide the traction that's necessary for the large trucks that are going to be coming into your job site to deliver the products. Additionally, anywhere that you have corners or curves in your driveway, you'll need to make sure that that portion of the driveway is wide enough to allow the truck to navigate around those corners without getting off of the prepared surface. One potential gotcha that I've seen during winter weather months when we're talking about making deliveries is the ability of a truck to get into a job site because the ground is frozen, but then get stuck trying to get out because during the process of the delivery, the ground thawed. So that's a good reason to make sure that that driveway is adequate in width and depth to make sure that that truck won't have to go off of that prepared surface in order to make the delivery or to get out of the job site. It's also very important to make sure that whatever other materials and debris are on the job site are clear of the path for the vehicle as it's entering the driveway. It will be less likely that they'll be able to get off of the driveway to get around that sort of stuff. So we want to make sure to keep that gravel prepared driveway nice and clear. Once the delivery vehicle has made it into the site, in the case where the materials are there sooner than the job site is ready for them, and there might need to be some storage of the material, it's very important, especially during the winter months, to make sure that that material is elevated off of the ground on some sort of scrap material that keeps it level and straight, and that prevents it from being in the mud and absorbing that moisture. Also, the materials should be covered, but in such a way that it protects the top of the material from snow and rain, but allows for ventilation so that we don't have condensation collecting on those materials, potentially creating a mold concern. So let's go ahead and get into the installation of materials. We'll start with wall panels, and just like any time of the year, it's important to brace them properly. During the winter, we tend to get more surprise windstorms, I'll say. And so in that case, it's a good idea to brace them extra stout just to make sure that, especially if you go home for the evening or go for the weekend, you don't come back to materials that have been toppled by heavy winds. Also, if you've had any frost or ice or snow, you'll want to make sure that that is cleared off of the deck where the wall panels are going to be installed. If you install them over snow, for instance, they may be gapped away from that deck, and then when the snow melts out, there will be a space in between the bottom of the wall and the deck. Another consideration during the wet months is using a high resin sheathing product. There are many out there. The ones that are labeled as having, or the ones that are specified as having the vapor barrier built into them, tend to have less propensity to absorb moisture because they have a higher resin content. They hold up better in the wetter months and require less time bringing the building's moisture down after it's enclosed. Once you've got your walls on, the next step would likely be installing floor trusses, and there are a few steps that you want to make sure to take in order to have that floor truss installation go well. First off, you'll want to make sure that you don't have any ice or snow on top of your bearing plates that you're putting your floor trusses on, and that way you don't, like we were talking about with the wall panels, end up with any gaps in between those floor trusses and the walls once that ice or snow melts out of there. After you've got your trusses installed, you'll want to make sure that there isn't any ice or snow on top of the trusses before you install your sheathing. And again, I would recommend considering using a high resin floor sheathing product that will be less likely to absorb moisture during the winter months. And that way, again, it holds its shape better and is less of a hassle to get to an acceptable moisture after you've enclosed the building. One thing to also consider with the floor truss installation is the adhesive that you're using for the sheathing. Some adhesives work well in cold conditions and wet conditions, others do not. So make sure that the adhesive that you're using is appropriate for the conditions that you're doing the installation under. Well, now that we've got our walls on, we've got our floor down, maybe another set of walls, it's time for the roof. And a lot of the same tips that apply to the other components apply to the roof trusses as well. First off, we'll want to make sure that there isn't any ice or snow on top of the bearing plates that we're setting those trusses on. We want to make sure that those trusses are in full contact with the walls once they are installed, and they stay that way. Just like the walls, we'll want to make sure that we brace the trusses very well to prevent any potential for toppling in a wind event. Unfortunately, I have received calls in the past where a crew left in the afternoon, especially before a weekend, and all of the trusses were stood up and they thought braced adequately, leave for the weekend, have a wind event, and come back on Monday and find the trusses all toppled over. Gable ends, if they have the sheathing on them especially, kind of act like a big sail in the wind and apply a lot of force to the bracing. So you'll want to make sure that your bracing is very stout on those roof trusses before you leave for the evening or for the weekend. Once those trusses are all up and you're ready to start installing your sheathing, again, make sure that there isn't any ice or snow on top of the trusses before you start setting your sheathing. That way you don't end up with gaps in between your sheathing and the trusses. If that ice or snow were to melt out, that's what the result would be. Also, again, I'd recommend using a high resin sheathing that will withstand the elements well and make the drying process easier for the building once it's enclosed. Once you have your trusses installed and you're getting ready to do that sheathing, you'll want to make sure that you are accounting for adequate ventilation. And that can be bird blocking or gable vents, ridge venting. There are also ventilation methods that can be installed above the wall line at the roofing level. Whatever method you're choosing, just be sure that there's adequate ventilation so that after the trusses have been installed, there won't be a tendency for condensation or moisture to collect in the attic. Uh, a couple of things that will ensure: one, that you don't have mold, but additionally, having good ventilation in the attic will reduce the potential for truss uplift after the building is complete, which can create some callbacks that are unfortunate. But the drier the attic space is, the less likely you are to have mold or truss uplift. So again, great to talk about the challenges that we have during the winter so we can be prepared and avoid having them be any more of a hassle than they need to be. You'll want to make sure that your access to your job site is solid and adequate. When you install your components, brace them adequately, use products that are less likely to absorb moisture, and keep the snow and ice off during the installation. If you'd like to learn more about truss uplift, which we talked a little bit about, you can take a look at this video here. Or if you'd like to learn a bit more about the best practices for wall panel installation, take a look at this video here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.